The bank account showed $847. 3 months ago, it had $340,000. Margaret stared at the screen, her hands trembling. The man she'd trusted with everything. The man she called her nephew, who'd eaten at her table every Sunday for 7 years, had just destroyed her life. And she had no idea how he'd done it. Margaret Thompson was 68 years old, sharp as ever, and proud of the life she'd built. 40 years as a school teacher, a modest but comfortable retirement, a paid-off house in Portland, and that nest egg, $340,000 she'd saved penny by penny, meant to last her the rest of her life. She wasn't naive. She'd seen the news stories about financial scams, about predators targeting the elderly. But this was different, because Daniel wasn't some stranger on the phone. He was family, or so she thought. But there were 3 things Margaret didn't know. 3 warning signs she'd missed. And by the time she discovered the truth, it would be too late to stop what was already in motion. What happened over the next 18 months would expose one of the most calculated betrayals you've ever heard. And the twist? You're not going to see it coming. Let's go back to where this started. 7 years before that bank screen. Before the $847. Before everything fell apart. Margaret had always been alone. Never married. No children. Her sister had passed away 15 years ago, leaving behind one son, Daniel. He was 23 then, struggling to find his footing after dropping out of college. Margaret did what family does. She reached out. That first dinner, Daniel seemed lost but grateful. He talked about wanting to turn his life around, about feeling like he'd disappointed everyone. Margaret saw something in him. Potential, maybe, or just the loneliness she recognized in herself. So she helped him, got him a job interview through a friend, let him stay in her guest room for a few weeks while he got on his feet. Those weeks became months, then years. But Margaret didn't mind. For the first time in decades, her house felt like a home. Daniel became the son she never had. He'd fix things around the house, drive her to doctor's appointments. They'd watch Jeopardy every night and argue about the answers. He called her Aunt Maggie. She called him her blessing. But here's where it gets strange. Because while Margaret thought she was saving Daniel, he was studying her, learning her routines, her passwords, her vulnerabilities. Every act of kindness she showed him, he was cataloging. Every piece of trust she gave him, he was calculating how to weaponize it. The predator didn't show up at her door. She invited him in, fed him, loved him. It started small, so small that Margaret almost didn't notice. In year 3 of living together, Daniel mentioned he was taking online business courses. You want to learn about investments, he said. Maybe start a small consulting firm someday. Margaret was proud. She'd bought him a laptop for Christmas, an expensive one, because education was important. Then came the questions. Casual at first. Aunt Maggie, have you thought about your retirement accounts? You know, with inflation and everything, you might want to diversify. And I've been learning about these high-yield savings accounts. Want me to research some options for you? Margaret appreciated his concern. She was getting older. Managing finances was becoming overwhelming. All those statements and forms and phone calls to the bank. When Daniel offered to help organize her paperwork, she said yes without hesitation. Why wouldn't she? This was family. She gave him access to her filing cabinet, showed him where she kept her important documents, even wrote down some of her passwords in case of emergency. After all, what if something happened to her? Someone needed to know where everything was. Daniel nodded, took notes, smiled that warm smile that had convinced her to let him stay all those years ago. What Margaret didn't know was that Daniel had been planning this moment since that very first dinner. The dropped-out college student, the struggling young man who needed help, that was Act 1. This was Act 2, and Act 3 was about to get very expensive. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because what happened next, what Daniel did over the following months, was so methodical, so carefully executed, that even the bank wouldn't notice until it was far too late. Here's what you need to understand about financial exploitation. It's not usually a single theft. It's death by 1,000 cuts, and Daniel had learned to make those cuts invisible. It started with the small checking account, the one Margaret used for daily expenses. Daniel noticed that she rarely checked it. Once a month, maybe when the statement came. So he tested the waters. $200 transferred to an account he'd opened in both their names. He'd mentioned it casually weeks before. Aunt Maggie, for household expenses. Easier than you having to give me cash all the time. She'd agreed. It made sense. The $200 became $500, then $1,000. Margaret never noticed. The account always seemed to have enough for groceries and bills. What she didn't see was that Daniel was also depositing just enough back in to keep things looking normal. He was establishing a pattern, building trust in the system he was creating. But here's where things get really dark, because Daniel wasn't just stealing from one account. Over the next 8 months, he slowly gained access to everything. The savings account she'd had for 40 years, her IRA, even the small investment account her sister had left her. How? By becoming indispensable. Every time Margaret needed to call the bank, Daniel would offer to do it. "You rest, Aunt Maggie. I'll sort this out." He'd put himself on as a joint account holder just for convenience. For emergencies, banks don't question these things when the account holder is sitting right there, nodding along, trusting. And Margaret trusted completely. By the end of that first year, Daniel had legal access to every dollar Margaret owned, and she had no idea what was about to happen. Picture this. You're 68 years old. You've spent 4 decades saving money. You've been responsible, careful, lived modestly. You trust someone completely, someone you love. And that person is systematically dismantling your entire financial life while sitting across from you at the dinner table, asking how your day was. That's what makes this so devastating. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was intimate, daily, sustained. But what happened next is where this story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Month 14. This is when Daniel stopped being careful. Maybe he got cocky. Maybe he got desperate. Or maybe, and this is what the investigation would later suggest, he'd always planned to take everything. The slow approach was just to avoid triggering any alarms. Large transfers started happening. $15,000 here, $22,000 there. Daniel had convinced Margaret to sign paperwork for what he called investment opportunities. Municipal bonds, he said. Safe, stable returns for her retirement. She signed. Why wouldn't she? He'd been managing her finances for over a year. Everything seemed fine. The statements he showed her, printed from his laptop, all looked legitimate. Her accounts, according to those fabricated documents, were actually growing. But the real statements, the ones coming to the house, Daniel intercepted them, told Margaret he'd set up paperless billing to reduce clutter. She'd agreed. She hated clutter. The truth was drowning in that paperless billing. $50,000 disappeared in June, another $70,000 in August. Daniel had open accounts in his name, created shell LLCs, established a paper trail that made the money look like legitimate business investments. He'd learned all of this in those online business courses. Margaret noticed nothing, because how could she? The house still ran. Bills still got paid. Daniel was still there every night, watching Jeopardy, being the perfect nephew. But then came the phone call that changed everything. It was September. Margaret's friend Linda called. They'd been talking about retirement plans, and Linda mentioned using a financial advisor. "You should have someone review your accounts, Maggie. Make sure everything's optimized for your age." It seemed like innocent advice. Margaret mentioned it to Daniel that night. His reaction was immediate. Subtle, but immediate. Pause, a flash of something in his eyes. Panic? Anger? It was gone in a second, replaced by that easy smile. "That's a great idea, Aunt Maggie," he said. "But those advisors charge a fortune. How about I do a full review this weekend? I'll print out everything, we'll go through it together." That weekend never came, because 3 days later, Daniel was gone. Margaret woke up on a Thursday morning in late September. The house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel's bedroom door was open. His closet was empty. The laptop was gone. So were the files he'd been organizing for her. On the kitchen table, there was a note. 2 sentences. "I'm sorry. I had to go." That's it. No explanation. No forwarding address. Just those 6 words and 18 months of theft. Margaret stood in that kitchen, holding that note, not understanding. Her first thought wasn't about money. It was about Daniel. Was he okay? Had something happened? She tried calling his phone. Disconnected. She tried his email. bounced back. Then she did what she should have done years ago. She called the bank directly, asked them to read her account balances over the phone. The first number made her laugh. It had to be a mistake. They'd transposed digits or something. "No," she said. "My savings account. The one ending in 4782. The banker paused. "Ma'am, that account currently has a balance of $3,200. That's impossible. I have over $200,000 in that account." Another pause. Longer this time. "Ma'am, I'm looking at the transaction history. There have been multiple large withdrawals over the past 18 months, all authorized by joint account holder Daniel Morrison." The room tilted. Margaret sat down hard in the kitchen chair. "Check the others," she whispered. "Check all of them." The banker did. And with each number, with each nearly emptied account, Margaret felt something inside her break. The IRA depleted. The investment account, $400 left. The checking account she'd had since 1985, overdrawn. Total liquid assets remaining, $847. 40 years of teaching, 40 years of savings, gone. And the man who took it, the man she called family? She realized she'd never really known him at all. The nephew she'd helped, the young man she'd loved, that person never existed. It was always just Daniel. Just the con. Just the theft. But here's what Margaret didn't know yet. Here's the piece that makes this story go from devastating to absolutely enraging. The police detective's name was Sarah Chun. She'd been working elder financial abuse cases for 11 years. She'd seen this pattern before, too many times before. When Margaret filed the report, Detective Chin's first words were, "I believe you, and I'm going to help you, but you need to prepare yourself for what we might find." The investigation moved fast. Bank records, security footage, digital forensics on the accounts. Within 2 weeks, they had the full picture. Daniel Morrison, if that was even his real name, had stolen $338,153 from Margaret over 18 months. But it was worse than that. Margaret wasn't his first victim. She wasn't even his fifth. Daniel had been running this con for 9 years. Different cities, different aunts and uncles and family friends. He'd target people who were alone, who wanted connection, who had savings but were starting to need help managing their lives. He'd move in, build trust, gain access, steal everything, disappear. Conservative estimate? He'd stolen over $2 million from elderly victims across 4 states. But here's the truly sickening part. Daniel wasn't actually Margaret's nephew. Her sister's real son, the actual Daniel Morrison, had died in a car accident when he was 19. This man had somehow discovered that detail, assumed the identity, and used a dead teenager's name to con a grieving aunt who'd never met her nephew in person. Margaret's sister had been estranged from the family. She'd moved across the country decades ago. Margaret had known of her nephew, but never met him. When Daniel showed up, claiming he wanted to reconnect with his only family, she believed him. Why wouldn't she? Let me be clear about what this means. A stranger researched Margaret's family history, found a dead relative, stole that identity, and then spent 7 years pretending to be her nephew, eating her food, sleeping in her home, calling her Aunt Maggie, all while planning to rob her of everything she'd spent a lifetime building. 7 years of fake family dinners. 7 years of manufactured memories. 7 years of "I love you, Aunt Maggie." All of it was a lie. Every single moment. Remember that bank screen? The one that showed $847? Let's go back there now. Margaret stood in that bank, staring at that number. And here's what was running through her mind. Not the money, not the theft, but the Sunday dinners. The way Daniel would laugh at her jokes. The Christmas when he'd given her a framed photo of his mother, a picture he'd probably bought at a thrift store. The devastation of this betrayal isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in every moment of manufactured love. Every fake smile, every goodnight, Aunt Maggie, that was really just a predator checking to make sure his mark was still under control. Detective Chun eventually tracked Daniel to Nevada, arrested him coming out of a casino where he'd been gambling away someone else's life savings. He had $14,000 in cash in his car. That was it. The rest was gone, spent on travel, on setting up his next identities, on living a life funded by destroying others. He's in prison now, 12 years. It won't be enough. It never is. Margaret? She lost her house, had to move into a small apartment, went back to substitute teaching at 69 to survive. Her retirement, the one she'd spent 4 decades building, was gone. But here's what she told me when I interviewed her for this story, and this is the part that broke me. I don't miss the money as much as I miss him. Not the real him. There was no real him. But I miss the version I thought existed. I miss having family. That's what he really stole. My ability to trust that feeling again. She paused, then added, if he had just asked me for money, I would have given it to him. All of it, gladly, because I loved him. And he knew that. That's what makes it unforgivable. He knew I would have helped him, and he chose theft instead. He chose the con, because the con wasn't about the money. It was about the power, the control, the game. Here's what you need to know. This happens more than you think. The National Council on Aging estimates that elders lose $3 billion annually to financial exploitation. And 60% of the time, it's someone they know, someone they trust, family members, caregivers, friends. The signs were there with Margaret. Maybe you noticed them as I was telling the story. Someone gradually gaining access to accounts, isolation from other financial advice, deflection when questioned about money, helping in ways that increase dependence and reduce oversight, paperless billing that eliminates outside verification. But the biggest sign? When someone makes themselves indispensable. When they become the sole manager of another person's life. That's not help. That's control. And control is the foundation of exploitation. If you have elderly parents or relatives, talk to them. Not to scare them, but to protect them. Set up systems with multiple points of verification. Regular reviews with neutral third parties. Transparency that doesn't depend on one person's honesty. And if you're the one starting to need help managing your life, build a team, not a dependency. Use professionals with oversight. Create checks and balances. Because the sad truth is that predators don't always come from outside. Sometimes they're already sitting at your dinner table. Margaret's case isn't unique. It's not even rare, but it is preventable. The question is, will we pay attention? Or will we wait until it's too late? Until we're staring at a bank screen that shows $847 where there used to be a lifetime of security? $340,000. 40 years of work. 7 years of lies. She called him family. He called it an opportunity. And that's the difference between someone who loves you and someone who's just waiting for the right moment to take everything you have. If this story made you feel something, anger, sadness, fear, leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the next Margaret could be someone you love. And the next Daniel, he might already have a key to their house.